Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Robin, or A Hobbit's Reading List, and today we are going to talk about all the books I read in July. So in July, I read a total of 12 books. The way that I figure this out, if I don't have like a nice break where I just like finish books on the last day of the month and don't pick up another one, is that especially for audiobooks, whatever month I listen to the book the most in is where I count it. So, for example, Schmutz, which was my last book of July, I had, I believe, about 2 hours left by the end of the month, and I finished it on August 1st. Yeah. So I just counted it for July because I listened to like 80% of it in July. So just to clear up any confusion or anything that, or so I wanted to go over some stats and then tell you a little bit about the books that I read. I don't have any like nice graphics as like proof because something's wrong with my spreadsheet, especially for the audio. And I need to figure that out before I can like, so you're just gonna have to trust me on this. Or you can fact check me, I guess. But for the total amount of pages that I read in July, I read 1,892 pages. So that's all my physical books. I don't count the audiobook page total because that's not fair. But for audiobook, I did listen to 18 hours and 50 minutes. And that's spread across, I believe, 5 audiobooks. So they're fairly short. And that does make me a little concerned for August because for most of August I will be listening to the audiobook version of the Lord of the Rings series. And they're all about 20 hours. And so if I only did 18 hours for the month. Oh, concerned. Anyway, and then my average star rating was a 4-star. I tend to be more nice in my ratings unless I absolutely hated the book. So my ratings do tend to be a little high, and sometimes when I'm explaining or giving a synopsis about the book, you're like, Robin, it doesn't sound like you actually like the book, which maybe. But I feel bad giving like low rating. So I'm going to go in order of when I finished the books. A lot of these I finished about the same time because of how I listen to audiobooks and then read physical books. The first book that I finished in July was Quick Service, which can only be found in this, The Most of PG Wodehouse. You will not find it on its own. Trust me, I looked, and instead I had to order this like 600-page collection. And who knows if I'll get, well, I'm sure I'll get to the other stories because my dad and I are trying to read all the PG Wodehouse books for our podcast. So eventually I will get to all the other stories in here. But it's the very last one, and it was only like 200 pages or so. I could give you the actual total because I did figure it out. But Quick Service is about hijinks, like most of P.G. Wodehouse. It is about this portrait, pretty much, that various people are trying to steal, and they're trying to steal it. Some of them for like the same reason, sort of. Others for different reasons. But they're all working at like cross purposes with each other. And it is really amusing. You know, PG Wodehouse is a great comic writer. I did give it a 4-star. I believe part of the issue I had with it was just like some of the logic, probably. But I really enjoyed it. I think it was really amusing. And if you want something just like fun that'll like suck you into the story, like definitely check out PG Wodehouse because he has a lot of great adventure stories like that. Next, I read The Reek in a buddy read with Jess from Books Past Bedtimes, and I loved it. This is the third book in the Monster series by Lily Mayne that is all about human men falling in love with monsters who identify as male from this other world. It's post-apocalyptic, and I think it has a lot of great commentary on, like, probably the direction that America is going in, which is upsetting, but I find it refreshing for that to be acknowledged. And I just really enjoy it. You know, the Reek is about the Reek, which is what the monster is called. His name is Auri. And he ends up being found by this raider named Ghost, and they take Auri back to their camp to get healed because he's very damaged from being captured by the military. And they're so cute. They're both like very sweet and anxious, and it's adorable. It's adorable. And the smut is really, really, really good. So I really enjoyed this series. I was so happy I was able to read it. I gave it 5 stars because I just loved it. It was so good. Next, I finished My Government Means to Kill Me by Rasheed Newson. This is about a 18 to 20-year-old, because we follow him through a couple years, named Trey, who moved to New York City from Indiana. And he does this so that he can be himself, essentially. He is a gay black man in 1986, so Indiana is probably not the best place for him. And it's all about him sort of coming into his own in New York, making these friends, and then also realizing the impact of the AIDS epidemic and working more to get more rights and care for the people who have AIDS, for gay people in general. And it was just like, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really well done. And I appreciate that it has footnotes as well, so that I can sort of do like my own research, because I thought it was really interesting. And I'm sort of reading a lot of books that have this like other context, you know, all this background information that I don't know, it was just really, really good. I did give it a 4-star because I felt like it ended a bit abruptly. Like, we get so much detail in a majority of the book, and then it just sort of like ends. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I walked away from it being like, well, I guess the plot resolved. So I was like, oh, well, that was disappointing. But it was still really good. I do really still recommend it. Just be forewarned that the ending will leave you a little dissatisfied. I also listened to it on audiobook, and the narrator was really, really good. I had a good month with narrators. I need to speed this up. So next I finished Win, which is a novella in the Monster series. It goes back to the first couple of Danny and Win, and Win taking Danny into the monster world to do this like ritual that will extend Danny's life to match Win's, because Win is like ancient and he has like 12,000 years ish left, and he can't imagine having that without Danny. And so they go to do this ritual, and it's very cute. When I was reading Soul Eater, which is their book, I kept saying that I would be happy if they just kept like walking and getting to know each other and having sex, and that's pretty much what this was. So it was great. I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read The Lightning Struck Heart by TJ Klune. This is about a wizard's apprentice named Sam and his friends, a gay unicorn named Gary, and a giant named Tiggy, who go on an adventure, who go on a quest to save the prince of their kingdom from a dragon that had kidnapped him, reluctantly, because none of them like the prince. But along with them is the prince's fiance, Ryan, who is a knight, who Sam just happens to be in love with. And it's very funny. TJ Klune, I feel like he writes his series just completely differently. It's just for like him, and there are a lot of like sex jokes and just very like a quick banter moments and just sections where it's just like completely off the walls. I found it really enjoyable, but I could see why. I could see if like not a lot of other people appreciate that. I did. So I gave it a 4.5, mainly because of the use of a word that I felt like was completely unnecessary and triggering to me personally. And I feel like maybe if TJ Klune was writing these books now, he probably wouldn't have included that word. But it's a word for sexual assault. Just leave it at that. And he used it like in jokes, but not making jokes about it. But I still appreciate it. So it did lose half a star, but it's still a 4.5. So I thought still really good. Then listened to Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut. Galapagos is a look back a million years ago to 1986. And it's about this group of people who are going on this tour of the Galapagos Island at the same time that the world just sort of like ends, and they sort of repopulate the world. It was really interesting. Kurt Vonnegut is probably not my favorite author, but he has a lot of interesting ideas that I find intriguing and the way that he presents them. So I will say I enjoyed it. It's just, it's not going to be my favorite. He's not going to be my favorite. So I gave it a 3.5, but I do recommend reading it because it made me think a lot. I then read Fantasies by George MacDonald. This was written in like 1858, I believe. And it's about this guy who I believe is named Anados. It's been a minute since I read it, and his actual name's only in the book like 4 times. So I believe it's Anados. He goes to the fairyland and is going to explore and meet a woman to love. It was boring, quite honestly. Like, I finished it and like it also ended like really disappointingly. So I gave it 2.5. I don't recommend reading it, quite honestly. Like, there are other better fairy stories to read. Don't read one from the 1850s. It also got very like preachy towards the middle of like, you should do this and God says this, and like, I don't mind obviously stories having morals. I think that most stories have morals and moral lessons in them, but I want them to be a little more subtle. So after that I picked up 9.5 Weeks, which is I believe technically a novella about a love affair that lasts 9.5 weeks and sort of how it develops between these two people. Neither of them have names. It's semi-autobiographical. It was, I walked away wanting more. I wanted more detail. I wanted to know more of how it developed, because it was just sort of like, at some point I was tied to a leg of the chair and he was feeding me from his own plate, but I'm just like, how did that happen? What did you think the first time it happened? Give me more detail. And I didn't get it, and that was disappointing. But it was really good. It was a really quick read. I also know there's a movie about it from like the 1980s, but I probably won't watch it just because I'm past it now. So I did give it a 4-star because it was 117 pages. There wasn't a lot of time for it to like be horrible or anything. So I then started listening to Something Fabulous by Alexis Hall. I will say the narrator is great. I really enjoy Nicholas Bolton. He also narrated Glitterland by Alexis Hall. I think he does a great job. Something Fabulous is about a duke named Valentine who had tried to fulfill a promise that he made his father to marry this like daughter of a family friend. And he tries to fulfill that. The daughter is horrible and runs away, and then tries to convince other people to murder him for daring to follow through on a promise of an arranged marriage. Anyway, Valentine tries to follow her along with her twin brother Bonnie, and their relationship develops into something more than, you know, friendship, obviously. I will say, I thought Bonnie and Valentine were really cute when it was just the two of them. As soon as another character was added in, I hated everyone except Valentine. I thought they were horrible. They didn't show the proper amount of respect that would have been appropriate in that time. And I believe, and I said this in my blogs as well, I was like, I can suspend my disbelief about, like, so many queer people just being, like, open and honest. Like, that's great. That's what I want in queer historical fiction. I cannot suspend my disbelief about people just being so horribly rude and disrespectful to a duke. That would not have happened. And I'm just like, no, because that's the easiest thing to sort of address. Like, you can be like, this character said, like, your grace, like, semi-sarcastically, like, okay, that's fine, that's understandable. But the way that people were behaving around him was just, I couldn't do it. I gave it a 3-star. Mainly the relationship between Bonnie and Valentine really saved it, because I did really enjoy it, but I could go lower, because I also just really, really hated Arabella. She's an awful character. While I was listening to that, I picked up We Could Be So Good by Sebastian, which was such a great sort of, like, contrast. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I'm like, this is how you write queer historical fiction. So We Could Be So Good is about Nick and Andy, who work at a New York City newspaper in 1959. They start out as, like, really good friends, and then, like, feelings happen. And I don't want to get too into it. I will say it's just, like, it's just really cute and heartwarming, and it was, after reading something fabulous, it was refreshing. So I highly recommend picking up We Could Be So Good if you want queer historical fiction. Once I finished that, I picked up The Pothunters by PG Wodehouse, which I had to read for the podcast. The Pothunters, I do not recommend. It was PG Wodehouse's first published work, and it's a school story, so it takes place in an all-boys school. And it's about this, like, sports day, and some of the prizes getting stolen, and so we're trying to figure out, like, who, but there's so many characters. Like, it's 120-ish pages, and I felt like it was a 500-page novel, just because of, like, all the information that is just, like, dumped on you about all these characters, only half of whom really matter. If you want to know all of my thoughts about the Pothunters, check out our podcast in, like, September, because that's when that episode should come out. I gave that a 3-star, which I think is my lowest rating for a PG Wodehouse book. I don't recommend that one. And then finally, I finished the month listening to Schmutz by Felicia Berliner. I really enjoyed this. This is about a Hasidic woman who's about 18, 19, named Razel, who is breaking all sorts of rules. She has a laptop, she goes to school, which, like, that one, the family and the community are like, okay, but, like, once you're married, that's gonna stop. But because of this, going to school and having a laptop, she makes friends with Goyen people. She uses her laptop for not schoolwork, and then she develops a porn addiction. So it's Razel grappling with this addiction and knowing it's wrong and not being able to give it up despite all of the expectations that are on her from her community and her faith. And I thought it was so interesting. Sort of like with My Government Means Kill Me, I felt like the ending was a little bit abrupt. So I gave it a 4.5, which I do stand by, because I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was a really interesting look into the Hasidic community, because I don't have a lot of experience there. It's a totally different type of Judaism than what I've experienced. And so I appreciated that look into it. And it made me want to start learning Yiddish. So I have that. But my battery's about to die. I'm going to let you guys go. Leave a comment if you've read any of these books. And like the video, subscribe, click the notification bell, and check out my vlogs so that you can see all my opinions in real time. Thank you, love you, bye!